we as a community are trying our best to cope and still promote our advocacies through alternative avenues. Tuloy pa rin po ang ating laban. For fans of RuPaul's Drag Race, you may have noticed that our title is a reference to the reading challenge. But this webinar will involve a different type of reading. Reading is indeed fundamental, but in this context, we will be holding a virtual human library. A human library event is meant to facilitate conversations between people and aims to break down stereotypes and preconceived notions that humans have about others. So in this scenario, we have two human books or speakers who will tell their stories, and you, the participants, are the readers who engage in conversations with these books. To officially start off our program, EnggLib's very own Mr. Mark Angelo Francisco will deliver the opening remarks.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Muli ako si Kuya Mark. Kinatawan at patunay na ang Engineering Library o EnggLib ay inclusive at isang safe space maging sa komunidad ng LGBTQ+. Sa isang yugto ng aking buhay o sa yugto ng karamihan sa miyembro ng LGBTQ+, ang pinakamahirap ngunit pinakamatapang na pagharap sa ating buhay ay ang pag-out, lalo na sa ating pamilya. Isang disappointment, kahihiyan, isang kasalanan, at pagtatakwil sa karamihan ang malamang kumakaharap o di kaya'y bumabagabag pa sa isip ng isang LGBTQ+ member na hindi pa lubusang nag-out o tanggap ng sariling pamilya. Ako ay lubos na nagpapasalamat at nagkaroon ako ng isang pamilyang yumakap, umintindi at walang sawang sumuporta upang mapagtagumpayan ko ang buhay na nais kong tahakin. Ngunit karamihan sa atin ay hirap sa kanilang dinaranas na diskriminasyon at pag-aalipusta. Hindi lamang sa komunidad o sa trabaho, sa paaralan, o kahit sa ang pampublikong lugar. Higit sa lahat ang pagtatakwil mula sa sariling pamilya na siyang dapat unang yayakap at susuporta sa atin. Gender dysphoria ang tawag sa pagkabagabag ng isang tao ukol sa kanyang kasarian na nagdudulot ng depresyon at minsan pa nga'y pagkitil sa sariling buhay ng isang LGBTQ+ member. Ang layunin po natin ngayon sa ating human library na pinamagatang Reading is Fundamental, the human library is now open, ay upang makasama natin ang dalawang natatanging panauhin or human books upang magbahagi ng kanilang karanasan at kaalaman kung paano nila napagtagumpayan at kung gayon, ay paano rin natin mapagtatagumpayan ang ating laban sa diskriminasyon at opresyon at kung ano pa ang pampabatikos sa LGBTQ+ community. Ako din ay lubos na nagpapasalamat sa ating punong librarian na si Ma'am Sharon Maria Esposa Betan sa kanyang inisyatibong magsagawa ng isang natatanging aktibidad kagaya nitong human library na natataon sa pagdiriwang ng Pride Month at sa pagpapahintulot ni Ma'am Sharon na gamitin ng Engineering Library bilang platform sa ating pagsasagawa ng Reading is Fundamental, the human library is now open. Tuloy ang laban at happy Pride po sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Sir Mark. For today's webinar, each human book will present and share their stories about Transgender and Empowered and navigating life and law for the Filipino LGBTQ+. After their presentations, we will have an open forum or Q&A session based on the questions you have sent upon registration. If time permits, we can maybe accommodate some live questions from the audience. Let us now go to our first speaker. Ms. Ava Villanueva is a graduate of accountancy from Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Currently based in Singapore, she is a certified public accountant and has worked in the audit and banking industries. She is passionate about traveling, using her free time in exploring and learning the culture of different countries. She is also a burlesque performer, using the art form as her creative outlet. Ava is the treasurer of the Society of Transsexual Women of the Philippines, or STRAP, a pioneer and oldest running trans support and advocacy group in the Philippines. Here to talk about being transgender and empowered, please welcome Ms. Ava Villanueva.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ava Villanueva, I'm 25 from the Philippines. So levity aside, I would want to share you my experience as a transgender woman and how I empowered myself. So if I may share my PowerPoint to you. So I've prepared some slides as well. Okay, so not long ago, transgender women were viewed as weak and incapable. Weak since most transgender women were characterized as men with feelings of a woman, and incapable because of the preconceived notion that transgender women cannot and will not be able to achieve success in life. But time is changing and transgenders are catching up. Not only had we been more and more visible to the public, but also transgender women and individuals are flourishing in their chosen careers. So here are some of my sisters in STRAP. That is Dr. Jaya, Dr. Mikey, Dr. Brenda, Adri, and of course me. So just to give you an introduction as well as to what transgender is, I know you already know the concepts behind SOGI, but at least let me reiterate. So what is transgender? So it is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or expression differs from what is typically associated with the sex they were assigned at birth. So key terms for transgender is gender identity and or expression differs from our sex assignment at birth. So let me introduce you the gender-bent person, and you can see here that identity can be the four concepts of identity, orientation, sex, and expression. So assigned sex is the classification of a person as a male or female. So this is actually the gender marker that is placed upon you when you were born. So as for me as a transgender woman, my sex assignment at birth was male, and it is also the gender marker in my passport. So gender expression is an external manifestation of gender expressed through a person's name, pronouns, clothing, haircut, behavior, voice, and or body characteristics. So for me, my pronouns are her, she. You can also call me Your Majesty, Your Highness, and I would definitely accept that. But I do identify myself as a female, so kindly address me as her and she. And gender identity is a person's internal, deeply held sense of their gender. So for me, my gender identity is female. And for transgender people like me, our internal gender identity doesn't match our sex assignment at birth. So I was assigned male at birth. However, I identify myself as female, and I express myself as female. So again, here's the gender-bent person to reiterate it that identity, orientation, assigned sex, and expression are separate and distinct from each other. So they are not interconnected to each other, meaning to say that if you are born as a male, because usually what is happening is if you are born as a male, you have to identify yourself as a male, express yourself as a male, and fall in love with a woman. However, there are a multitude of cases where people have a mismatch between their identity and assigned sex. So just to give you a background on sexual orientation, it is a totally different category. So it is separate and distinct from gender identity. So sexual orientation is a person's enduring physical, romantic, and or emotional attraction to another person. So again, here is the gender-bent person. So I'm trying to provide you that the concepts of identity, attraction, sex, and expression are separate and distinct from each other. There are no connections. However, again, society, we have to conform with what society has taught us, that if we are identified as a male, we are born as a male, then or assigned as a male, we have to identify as male, express ourselves as male, and be attracted to women. Hence, in my personal journey to self-discovery, I developed an identity crisis during that time. So I was so confused as to who I really was, because there was no transgender term during that time. And it is difficult and also a bit scary, because I don't want to be associated with the term bakla, because I know if I get associated with that term, it will open doors to bullying and insult. So I was afraid that at that time to identify as such. That's why I just continued to live on. And then, of course, I felt a lot of loneliness inside me. So when fast forward, I was already in college. I was at the university. And then I bumped onto one of my high school mates. I was 1 year ahead of her. And then I was so surprised and thrilled to see her, to bump at her accidentally, because she was presenting herself as female and living her life as a female already. And that was during our college days. And I was very curious as to how she gained the courage and what did she do in order to present herself as such. And then we discussed briefly, and then however after that we weren't able to talk. And then that was the time that my passion to really self-declare myself as a woman first started. However, reality struck me because I have to finish college and I have to pass the board exam, and then eventually I have to work and I have to provide food for my family and also support my family. And it seemed that declaring myself as a woman would hinder me to those possibilities. So meaning to say that my opportunities will be limited if I try to self-identify myself as female. And then after, I think 2 years after I have joined the auditing firm. So I was an auditor before. I was presenting myself as male, but leaning onto the female side. I had my pants or slacks tailored to my own personal choice, and still on the effeminate side, but I cannot be overtly feminine because of, the conservative nature of the institution. And then after that, I contacted my friend again, which is my high school mate. So I contacted her again, and then from there we had coffee, and then we discussed. And then I told her my inhibitions, because I know there's not a lot of transgender women. Transgender people who are professionals, and it might limit my opportunity. So she told me, why not join, or why not go to one of the support group meetings of STRAP, which is the Society of the Transsexual Women of the Philippines. And then she told me there are professional transgender women, and try to go there, try to meet them, and from there you can decide whether you would want to self-identify as a woman. So that very moment, my passion to really self-identify reignited. So I went to the support group meeting venue, and the first time when I arrived, I met 3 lovely ladies, and they were like fairies because they have long hair, they have feminine features, and they're like fairies, So I was amazed, and I was still not transitioning at that time. So they asked me, how did I know about STRAP, and that's how I told them that it's because of my high school mate during that time. And then when the clock struck 3 p.m., one by one, the girls entered. The girls arrived to the support group meeting, and it's like a parade of nations from the Miss Universe. And they were so beautiful, and they were so gorgeous, and then they were greeting each other like the amigas, like the beso beso thing. So, hello, hi. And they greeted each and everyone. And at that very moment, I was so happy, and I know that I am a woman and I belong into this community and into this group. And that's the moment that I decided that I have to transition because I know I'm a woman. However, it is a difficult process also because I don't know how to transition. I don't know how to navigate this new identity of mine. But Society of the Transsexual Women of the Philippines helped me too. So it is a platform for us to share our own experiences and also to learn the stories of each other. So it was very endearing. It was an endearing experience. So that's why I decided to transition. So of course, there's a lot of ways on how a transgender person can transition. It can be as simple as coming out to your parents or to your relatives, to your friends. Also, you have medical interventions and also like hormone replacement therapies. So however, it is important to note that transgender identity is not dependent into transition. It's not dependent to transitioning because there are some common reasons as to why transgender people decide not to transition. And these are just some of the common reasons that I know of, and maybe there are a lot more. So it opened my eyes that you can still self-identify regardless of whether you have transitioned or not. So one would be health implications because, hormone replacement therapy can be a bit taxing to your body because of liver implications and kidney implications. So as for me now, I'm not taking any hormones anymore. I stopped because I had my body checkup and then the doctor said that I think you have to stop some medications first. So it is very important to have yourself medically supervised so that you can agree as to how your transitioning phase when it comes to taking in hormones. You can agree with your doctor on that. And then of course safety. Some of the transgender people, just by simply accepting that they are transgender and coming out to their family, they might get maltreated, they might get kicked out, they might get disowned by their family. As for me, I'm fortunate enough that my family is understanding. I didn't really technically came out, but eventually they accepted me through the process. And of course, financial capability, because as we all know, money talks, and some of these hormone replacement therapies and medical interventions are very expensive, or some of them are expensive. And as for me, for example, I had I was I wanted to have some body modifications, and I tried to pray so that I will have bosoms appear, but then it didn't work. So I have to save. So yeah, kidding aside, yeah, financial capability is one of the main reasons why trans people do not transition. And then our transition process, it doesn't end. Our life as a transgender person doesn't end there. We face a lot of issues. And these are just some of the issues that I know of and that have impacted me as well. So if I know there's a lot of issues that's there. So these are just the common issues that are faced by transgender people like me. One would be coming out. As I have told you, you can be kicked out. You can be disowned by your family. You can be vilified just by coming out as a transgender person. Next is employment. So this is very important. This is a very important issue to me because a lot of transgender people are barred from getting hired. Hence, they cannot achieve their maximum potential. And reality check, we have to get derive a source of income. And because our opportunities are limited, we are just pushed onto this 4 industry, which is beauty, entertainment, fashion, and then, of course, sex work. Seldom you will find transgender people in the field of accountancy, in the field of law, in the field of medicine. So I hope that in the future, transgender people like me will be hired because of the qualifications that we have, as well as the competencies that we have. And I hope they will not, they will hire us because of that reason. And then, of course, intrusion on our transgender bodies, because our bodies have been the subject of curiosity, and it's a bit irritating already when people always ask you what body modifications have you done, or whether you are transgender or not. And of course, this is very true when it comes to dating. The men will ask, so of course you have to disclose yourself. So it felt like you are compelled, or you are obliged to disclose who you are, which in fact you are not. Because, for example, another person, he's not obliged to tell whether he or she is rich or poor. So it's the same with us. We don't have the obligation to disclose whether we are transgender or whatever genitals we have already, because you won't ask that to a cisgender person. So it's a bit irritating, but of course we have to educate, and we have to for me, I educate them, and I develop also that I will only answer them about these body modifications and all on a need-to-know basis. If they need to know it, then I will ask them. I will answer them. But if they not, and if it's irrelevant, no, I will not. So that's how I deal with these intrusions. And of course, with all of these issues, it's very difficult to face all of these issues, but you need to empower yourself and deal these issues head on. So how do you empower yourself? So this is how I did, at least based on my own personal experience. Of course, education. You have to educate yourself first, and then know the SOGSC concepts, and then also try to educate others. So I had this office mate of mine who identifies himself as gay, and then he introduced me to a transgender person in my company way back then, in a multinational bank. So she was presenting herself as a man, but she identifies herself as a female. She had long hair, and then she's wearing long sleeves clothes. So my friend introduced me to her, and then we discussed, and then I provided her these concepts of SOGSC, and then I convinced her, why not go to the HR personnel and then ask whether you can present yourself as female, because you know who you are already. And then fortunately she was allowed to. So, and it was a very happy moment, because I am not the only transgender person in that bank already. So we are two already. So 2 transgender women. And then, of course, assert your rights politely, because we should remember that Filipinos in nature are kind and understanding. So, sabi nga nila, walang nakukuha sa magandang usapan. So, try to assert your rights politely, which also brings us to the next way on how to empower yourself, which is to ask politely. So, those two are interrelated to each other. So when I first joined the bank in the Philippines, that multinational bank, I was going to hand over the employment contract already, the signed employment contract. And then the HR personnel, so I asked the HR personnel, do I need to wear men's clothes? And then she said, yes. And then I responded, huh? So in that way, it's like asking already, and also asserting your rights, not to dress up as a man. And then what she did was to go to her HR superior, and then the HR superior came back and then told me, okay, you can dress up as you want. However, it should be in accordance with how the bank presents itself. So meaning to say that it has to be in the dress code also, but I have to follow certain rules. But I was very happy that I did not wear barong clothes, the usual barong office type of clothes already. So the first day I went there, I had my slacks already, the tailored fit slacks, and then I wore a blouse, a long sleeves blouse, which are leaning to the feminine side. And I was wearing a brassiere there then. So I was presenting myself as female, and then they had no problems about that. And also, it is important to point out to ask politely, because if you don't ask, the answer will always be a no. So try to ask as much as possible. So when I was employed already at this multinational bank, I did my work, I performed well, and then I went to my immediate superior. I asked her whether I can wear a dress. And then she was a bit doubting first. So she had to go to the manager and then ask the manager, and then the manager and then she told me to go to the manager directly. So I went to my manager and then I asked whether I can wear a dress. And then she responded, yes, you can. And then at that moment, I was very happy. I went to the mall to choose the dress, the first dress that I'm going to wear to the office. And it is very empowering because now you can live freely and be able to wear the clothes that you want. And wearing the clothes that you want doesn't affect your performance at all, or doesn't affect your performance negatively at all. So when I have to go to my work already, I wore that dress, and then my mother asked me, she was infuriated. She told me, "Is that what you're going to wear at work?" And then I responded, "Yes." "Why? Does it look bad?" That's what I said. And then she responded, "No." So I understand her that she is just concerned for me because I might get barred from work, or I might get fired from work. But then, so just try to ask. Just try to ask whether you can do this, you can do that. Ask it politely as possible. However, sometimes, even though we have done these things, educate, assert your rights politely, ask politely, at least in the context of employment and safe spaces, there will come a time that the outcomes are not favorable to us. So try to manage your expectations. So at least the issues are out there, and try to manage it, because not every time you will get what you want. So you can yield back, you can try to master all the courage and strength, and then get up again and try to, of course, develop some allies, because your allies are very important. Our allies can reinforce that LGBT people, or people like us, are also human beings with the same set of experiences, same set of skills, and that we are not totally different from cisgender persons. So I hope that you have learned some things in my experience, and thank you very much, and happy Pride. So thank you.
Teka lang. Sorry, sir. Thank you po, Miss Ava. Okay. Apa. Okay. So I will now introduce our second human book. Atty. Almero is a lawyer, activist, and writer. He was a legal resource person in the roundtable discussions for the crafting of a transgender health framework in the Philippines, sponsored by the AIDS Society of the Philippines, and facilitator of the Transgender Forum on making the workplace inclusive for the transgender community, sponsored by Philippine Financial and Inter-Industry Pride. In 2019, he was a panelist on transgender migration in Southeast Asia at the New York University, Shanghai's 2019 annual conference. Please welcome Attorney Leo Rey Almero.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Unlike Ava, I don't have a presentation, but I will be reading from something that I wrote. So, how do I start this? Well, fresh from college, I was asked by a human resources manager whether I was sure with my application to this food and beverage company. She said this according to her because the position will be surrounded by tough men, and she was not sure whether someone like me could relate to them. I was not yet out then, or was I ready to face that aspect of my life, but there it was. I was being judged not even on the merits of my education, but only by my perceived sexual orientation. While I had my own fair share of discrimination navigating life as a cisgender gay man, mine was not as bad as others. Probably it was also because my gender expression is mostly masculine, although I do own my feminine traits as well. I usually put an emphasis on cisgender to my identity as a gay man in order to acknowledge not only the existence of gender identity, but also to highlight my privilege, my cisgender privilege, that is compared to our transgender and non-binary siblings in the LGBT community. You may not know it, although this was already mentioned a while ago by Mark and also by Ava. The LGBT are our friends, families, colleagues, but not everyone who know LGBT people know that we are the most vulnerable to discrimination, to depression, and even homelessness. Transgender teens, in fact, are the most vulnerable to depression and suicide in the LGBT spectrum. While gays and lesbians have experienced more acceptance in the workplace, transgender men and women, on the other hand, continue to be discriminated against. Transgender people avoid certain places and situations out of fear of being assaulted, threatened, or harassed. Some of them have in fact been attacked, threatened, and even murdered precisely because of their gender affirmation. That's the sad fact, but that's a fact. From that, we understand that what the LGBT community experience is social exclusion. This is a multidimensional dynamic by which we are denied resources, rights, and opportunities that are available to most people within the same social, economic, political, and cultural sphere. In other words, for every gay man or transgender woman of the same age, educational attainment, and socioeconomic demography, a cisgender heterosexual man is given more rights, resources, and opportunities. While it is true that unlike in the more repressive countries, homosexuality is not criminalized, in the Philippines, we don't provide any legal frameworks that support those social needs of the Filipino LGBT community. In fact, in a country of 81 provinces, 145 cities, 1,489 municipalities, we only have a few which have anti-discrimination ordinances. That means only 7 provinces or 23 cities have these anti-discrimination ordinances. There are no laws currently protecting LGBT in the Philippines against discrimination. This means that only about 12% of the Philippine population are theoretically protected by these ordinances. I'm saying theoretically because generally these ordinances have no fangs, so to speak, to compel citizens and business entities alike to comply with them. On the other hand, the SOGI Equality Bill, SOGI was already discussed by Ava a while ago. So that's sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And we're looking at SOGI equality, not SOGI bill, but SOGI Equality Bill, meaning equality across all SOGI spectrum. The SOGI Equality Bills languishing in the Philippine Congress for almost 2 decades show its dire history before finally hurling the lower house. About a couple of years ago. And in fact, last year, about 5 versions of the SOGI Equality Bill or the Anti-Discrimination Bill have been filed both in the lower and upper houses. But again, they did not pass and become laws. And the only law we have that provides to some level some protection to LGBT are the Safe Spaces Act or the Bawal Bastos Law, which penalizes catcalling, wolf whistling, misogynistic and homophobic slurs, unwanted sexual advances, and other forms of sexual harassment in public places, workplaces, schools, as well as in online spaces. Another law, surprisingly, the Data Privacy Act of the Philippines, which considers sexual orientation and gender identity as sensitive personal information and which should not be disclosed without the consent of the data subject, is actually protected. Hence, this adds additional protection to LGBT people. However, these are actually very limited protection. We need more inclusive policies that will allow LGBT people to have full access to the social, political, economic, and cultural opportunities and experiences that non-LGBT people have. In other words, we need inclusive policies embedded in the law that will provide us access to jobs, to schooling, to healthcare services, to political participation, and to participation in our families. With access to schooling, I'm sure you have heard of certain incidents involving transgender women. And while we have an anti-bullying law, we do not have any law that protect gender diverse people from repressive policies like dress codes that limit them from affirming their gender identities. Ava mentioned a while ago about gender expression, and one of the ways that transgender women affirm themselves is through gender expression of their womanhood. So they dress up as women, but this is not just dressing up, it's really an affirmation of their identities. And based on this, repressive policies such as dress restrictions endorse a patriarchal, sexist, and heteronormative consciousness that, of course, may seem anachronistic to a modern academic setting. We also need legal provisions such as employment non-discrimination, measured by whether LGBT people achieve equal outcomes to non-LGBT people, such as receiving the same earnings that others get who have the same job qualifications or who meet the same eligibility standards. These are just some of the rights and opportunities that the SOGI Equality Bill endeavors to address. It has provisions on non-discrimination in schools and employment opportunities, equal access to healthcare facilities, prohibition even against gender profiling. While the SOGI Equality Bill do not particularly address as well the non-affirming dress restrictions vis-a-vis gender identity, it is nonetheless necessary inasmuch as transphobia and homophobia are still prevalent in Philippine society. Indeed, how many trans people have been denied work when during the interview they are revealed to be trans? And if ever offered a job, only with a precondition of changing how they express themselves in the office. And this was relayed a while ago by Ava when she started working in an auditing firm. She felt like she had to dress by expressing herself as a man, despite identifying as a woman. And of course, if given work, these women are not even allowed to carry the names which affirm them. Especially for local companies right now, they do not have more inclusive policies, especially for transgender men and women. Although in multinational companies, especially business process outsourcing companies, they have a more inclusive policy that apply to LGBT. A while ago, Ava also mentioned about the violence that they encounter on a daily basis and how they need to do something about adjusting to society. And I'm sure you have heard about Jennifer Laude, who met Joseph Scott Pemberton in a disco bar in Olongapo. And her gender identity and Pemberton's transphobia proved to be fatal. And in the middle of their sexual congress, Pemberton discovered that Jennifer was a transgender woman. Claiming passion and obfuscation and transpanic, Pemberton raised self-defense during the trial, claiming he was defending his life and honor. And of course, while the trial court did not consider transpanic as a valid argument for self-defense, it nonetheless recognized passion and obfuscation caused by transpanic as a mitigating circumstance that resulted to the lowering of the charge and finding Pemberton guilty of homicide instead of murder. Such recognition of transpanic necessarily reflects a culture that normalizes and rationalizes violence against transgender women. In fact, Jennifer Laude is not an isolated case. From 2008 to 2019, about 50 transgender women were killed in the Philippines, according to the Trans Murder Monitoring Report, which is an international organization. Sadly, as presently couched, different versions of the SOGI Equality Bill do not address this concern in particularity. Hence, even if the said bill is passed into law, it will nonetheless be inadequate to afford sufficient protection to the transgender community. A gender identity law, or a gender identity recognition law, I believe, which will necessarily complement all other proposals for transgender protection, is sorely missing in the Philippines and should likewise be passed later on. Also, in 2018, a civil partnership bill, which sought to provide adequate protections, rights, and obligations similar to marriage, was introduced to Congress. It was introduced in Congress. Nonetheless, the said bill, as drafted, covers cis heterosexual couples and cis homosexual couples. Again, the law is silent and does not clearly provide transgender persons in trans heteropassing and non-binary relationships the right to marry their partners. So we have to do something about this as well. And aside from this, and on a more personal level, I also believe that equal access, rights, and opportunities to participation in family relations are also something that we LGBT need. We have heard of many stories of LGBT when accessing healthcare facilities with their partners and said institutions not at all acknowledging them, the partners, as family. Even for a couple who spent many years together, the state and the various institutions in society do not consider these relationships as equivalent to family. If one of the partners gets sick, the other will not be recognized as decision makers for the other's treatment. I have discussed these concerns with my partner, and we understand that if we want to own properties together, there's no property relations that govern us. We still need to prepare numerous documents, numerous legal documents to ensure that we are able to address this. Trusteeship agreements, co-ownership agreements, and even, say, purchasing properties like sales agreements should be under our name. And of course, this is not the case to married individuals and even to cis heterosexual couples who cohabit, whose property relations are governed by the Civil Code. And yet, Philippine society itself does not want to accord these basic rights to LGBT people, even if the continued marginalization of the LGBT community has a cost to economy. In a study conducted by the Williams Institute of UCLA School of Law, it found that, and I'll quote this, employment discrimination against LGBT people means that they are not being used to their full capacity in the economy as when they are unemployed or are only hired for jobs that do not fully use their skills. Harassment in the workplace or marketplace also hinders the efficiency of LGBT workers, stopping them from making the economic contributions they are capable of. Businesses lose out on the full contribution of LGBT workers because of the socially embedded biases. Likewise, barriers to education for LGBT people reduce the amount of skills, abilities, and knowledge in the economy. What economists actually call human capital. LGBT students struggle to stay in school and to learn when they experience harassment or outright discrimination against them because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. As a result, LGBT people might get less knowledge and fewer years of education, which of course reduces the amount of human capital in an economy. And lastly, another form of human capital is of course health, which affects the ability of individuals to work in the workplace, in the marketplace, in the home, or to take care of family members. LGBT people face several challenges that reduce their health and ability to make economic contributions. LGBT people face barriers to getting healthcare because of discrimination by providers, more so for transgender men and women. Sometimes they are even denied services or treatment, and because of the lack of the availability of culturally competent care. Furthermore, LGBT individuals face added health challenges and discrimination, are physically and emotionally stressful, and can have effects on both the physical and mental health. And this minority stress generates health disparities for LGBT people that are rooted in their social and legal disadvantage. Poorer health and less access to appropriate healthcare add up to an impaired ability to contribute to the economy, unquote. So after that, what I'm really saying is that according the LGBT people, the most basic rights can provide so much economic gain. And yet, in the Philippines, we still do not have it. Many studies have already suggested that when countries become more inclusive, their economies become stronger, that passing laws to recognize the rights of LGBT people in participation in the marketplace, in families, and important institutions have positive effects on the economy. In fact, these studies suggest that there is positive correlation between having more inclusive laws and higher levels of GDP per capita. I do believe, however, the changes in the legal landscape may not be far into the future as it seems. And in fact, in the case of Halsis versus Civil Registrar, the Supreme Court said Lacking a manifestly restrictive textual definition of marriage, the Constitution is capable of accommodating a contemporaneous understanding of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. The plain text and meaning of our constitutional provisions do not prohibit SOGI SC, which means that although the Supreme Court did dismiss the petition of Falsis, the Supreme Court did so not because it cannot decide on the merits of marriage equality, but precisely because the petition itself did not provide the Supreme Court justiciable controversy, because the petitioner in that case was not actually, in other words, the petitioner in that case did not specifically state there that the constitutional provision was discriminatory to him because he was not even applying for a marriage license, if I remember correctly. And with this, what is needed are people, so activists and allies of the transgender communities, the non-binary communities, the lesbians and the gays, alike, who can lobby for the protection of the LGBT community against discriminations through laws and advocate for our rights before Congress and the courts. So we are hoping that through this forum, the Human Library will also have more allies after this forum. That will be all for me.
Thank you, Sir Leo. Okay, now we will start with our Q&A. So we have gathered some of the questions you have sent in the registration forms. And unfortunately, we cannot answer all of them due to the time restraints. But if you have any questions for our speakers, you may send them in the chat window, and we will try our best to accommodate them. First question for Ms. Ava. How can you get others to be more open-minded about LGBTQ plus people?
For me, for them to have an open mind, education plays an important role. So we should not get tired on educating people about the concepts of SOGI SC, because it is truly important in deconstructing their preconceived notions of what gender and sexuality is. So it is truly important to reiterate to them, because after all, right, education is more about repetition of these thoughts. And after some time, they will be able to understand that SOGI SC are separate and distinct from each other, and every person has it. So that will help and enable them to be open, not only to LGBT people, but also open in deconstructing their preconceived notions about gender and sexuality.
Yeah. If I may add, siguro, Lex, from what Ava said, I think one of the ways that we can have that is to, siguro, for people who want to get to know the LGBTQ people, to spend time with them. I think that's the most basic thing, because for us, there is usually misconception or misunderstanding because they only hear things without really experiencing the lives of the LGBTQ community. So, ano lang siya, be part of the, not naman be part of the community, but approach us, talk to us, discuss life with us, kasi we are very much open to providing space even for the straight community or the cis heterosexual community. We're very much open to it, but we are also hoping that they are also open to us, to understand us.
Okay, thank you po, Ms. Ava and Sir Leo. Okay, second question for both of our speakers. How far have we come to grabbing true equality for the community? And what more will this generation face or have to fight for?
Okay.
Okay.
Sige, I'll go first na lang muna. I think we're still far from it. Kanina I mentioned that it's good that in the Philippines, homosexuality and it's not criminalized unlike in other countries. But if you actually if you look into that research that I mentioned in the essay that I wrote, uh, the University of California, Los Angeles School of Law in Williams Institutes, when they did a study, they were looking at the legal policies that show inclusivity in several countries. Nandun pa lang tayo sa mababa. Very minimal inclusivity pa lang tayo kasi parang ang leveling niya is no inclusivity, decriminalization, some inclusive laws, tapos more inclusive laws, tapos parang yung fifth level niya is, I forgot the term pero parang most inclusive set of laws. Wala pa tayong yun nga, wala lang tayong criminalization so decriminalize lang tayo. The only thing that we have is a Safe Spaces Act. It's a good thing that we have the Data Privacy Act, but until now, we don't have the SOGI Equality Law, which actually just provides the most basic rights for the LGBT community. So medyo malayo pa tayo. And hand in hand with that, sabi ng Williams Institute, is we have to have a more open society. Kasi ang napapansin ko, especially, for example, from the corporate perspective, for the local companies, merong tolerance, but we don't need tolerance. What we want is acceptance and we want our rights. Ganun lang naman yun Yun. That's from me.
I would also want to re-echo what Leo said, that we are still far. Malayo pa tayo sa sa gusto natin makamit. And I just want to rephrase yung sinabing term na grab. Actually, we are not trying to grab equality. We are trying to achieve it and then sharing it to others and then spreading it. I've attended one of the seminars on the allies that and then one of my question is we transgender women sometimes viewed as encroaching rights of the cisgender people. Actually, we are not encroaching it. It's not a shift of power, diba? So we are just trying to share it to everyone so everyone will become empowered. And so far, medyo malayo pa tayo doon, but there will come a time and we just have to be patient in educating kasi it is very important that these concepts be accepted. Because hindi naman to basta-basta lang na concepts. These have been studied by experts and kailangan lang talaga to para ma-deconstruct lang kung ano yung preconceived notions natin. And of course, at least yung mga issues have been elevated already and solutions have been sought para ma-address and to redress yung mga issues na to. So it's very important. And although malayo pa tayo, at least we are trying to get kung saan natin gustong makapunta.
Okay, thank you. For our third question, how can we promote mental health in the LGBTQ plus community for both of our speakers?
So for transgender people, it's a bit difficult because we have an identity crisis. So what I can say to that is find a support group wherein you can share your experience, your fears, your aspirations para lang nailalabas mo kung ano yung mga nasa loob mo. And I think that helped on my side, and I hope it might, but I'm hoping that it can also be applicable to others. But that's what I did when I had these fears and thoughts about self-identifying myself as a woman. Fortunately, I met my friend and they introduced me to STRAP. And then from there, I shared my experiences. And then doon ko nalaman na hindi pala ako nag-iisa. Meron din palang ibang mga tao na nakakaranas nung kung ano yung nararanasan ko. And then there, absorb ko din kung paano nila hinahandle. And I'm trying to do that as well.
For me naman, how do you handle mental health concerns of the LGBT community? Siguro, just, how do I say this? Be there, just be there. Kasi when I was growing up, I kind of know, but hindi ko siguro napipinpoint. I mean, siguro alam ko naman na directly, pero hindi pa siya totally na-accept ko. Pero I had friends. And I also have friends who have mental health concerns, who are also part of the LGBTQ community. And what I always tell them is, I'm just here to listen. Ganun lang naman yung kailangan eh. And just tell people na you are a mental health advocate, that you're there to listen to them, or if they don't want to talk, that you're just there to show your support. And at the same time, one of the things that I realized the past last weekend was that we have so many LGBT organizations all over the country that are ready to help out. Reach out to them. Sabi nga ni Ava kanina, one of the things that she discovered in her journey of self-discovery is also discovering STRAP. I have my friends also in STRAP, and having that organization for them was, kumbaga, a safety zone, a safe space, and that helped them discover themselves. So, if wala kayong makakausap siguro sa community ninyo, sa Facebook naman, mahahanap nyo yung lahat ng mga LGBT organizations. We have STRAP, we have Rainbow Coalition ba yung tawag doon. So we have so many all over the Philippines, regional LGBT groups in fact. So if there are audience members in this forum who come from different provinces, you can always check out LGBT organizations there, and that will help you. That can provide you support, necessary support, so that you'll be able to talk about yourself or just be yourself.
Thank you, Sir Leo. Okay, fourth question. What are the programs LGBTQ plus are engaging nowadays in relation to COVID-19 pandemic?
For STRAP, we have partnered with AIDS Society of the Philippines to do a fundraising project to raise money for our fellow trans Pinays who were displaced by the pandemic. Kasi karamihan ng mga trans Pinays natin, I told you, di ba, limited lang yung opportunities na meron sila. Mostly yung iba dyan, racket lang. So kung wala silang racket or di kaya sarado yung establishment kung saan sila nagtatrabaho, hindi sila katulad natin na may comfort to work from home. So sila is mostly, halimbawa, beauty pageant. So iba dyan, wala nang mga events. So wala nang pwede silang mamikapan or di kaya nag-host sila ng event. So wala nang mga ganong events. So for us, buti na lang nakipag-partner din kami sa AIDS Society of the Philippines. So we raise funds to help them and provide them cash benefits para mapunan yung immediate needs nila. So far we have raised 200,000 pesos already to help our fellow trans Pinay sisters. So that's what we do to engage in the impact of this COVID-19.
Yeah, I actually saw that being shared by STRAP, yung fundraising nila for the transgender women all over the Philippines. And each and every organization all over the country have different programs to address the needs of the LGBTQ during this pandemic. Pero siguro, wala kasi akong direct na personal experience with the LGBT organizations right now that is helping or which are helping the LGBT community all over the Philippines. But isa sa mga napansin ko though is dumami, especially yung Pride Month, yung mga webcasts, which is a good thing because gusto sabihin, even with the lockdown that we are reaching more people, more LGBTQ community, and we are talking more, we are discussing issues, even if in the confines of our own homes. So that's a good thing. So marami actually, if you look at it, kanina nga sabi sa akin ni Jaya, one of our common friends ni Ava, sabi niya, dear, break a leg because I also have my own forum to attend. So ganun karami talaga. So look out kung ano man yung mga pinupost na mga LGBT organizations so that you can also help out, especially since we know that there is disparity in the LGBT community when it comes to socioeconomic status. So alam naman natin yun. So if you see fundraising activities, do something about it. Yung current concern ngayon, may mga fundraising activities din ngayon. So just if you have the extra money siguro, send out to help out, diba? Ganun lang.
Thank you po. We apologize for the power interruption kung napansin nyo. Okay. Okay, next question. What can you advise for those who are closeted and don't have any idea how to open up their sexuality to their own parents or coming out?
For me, because I didn't come out, however, what I can advise is come out at your own time, at your own pace. Don't get pressured by your peers to come out, most especially if coming out will be dangerous for you. So that's what I can advise. Come out at your own pace, and if it will be dangerous for you, your life is much more important than coming out. So there will come a time that it will be safe enough, and then you can come out fully. Yes, that's it for me.
Sa akin naman, I will address this two-way. One is, I will echo what Ava said na it's a personal process kasi coming out is a personal process. And at the same time, and I'll start with this, if you know someone, if someone was kumbaga confident enough to tell you about his or her sexuality or his or her gender identity, keep that to yourself. Kasi sabi ko nga, it's a personal journey. So don't preempt them. Don't reveal to the public what the information given to you in confidence. So gusto sabihin lang is don't out anyone. Usong-uso yan dito sa Pilipinas eh. Sige nitong artista, Bex. Sige nitong artista, ay transgender pala siya. Dapat ang perspective natin is, sabi ko nga kanina, data privacy law, baka magkaroon kayo ng problema kasi sensitive personal information yun. Since it is also a personal journey, let them go through coming out. And I also share the same experience with Ava eh, kasi I practically did not really come out to my family. It was, kumbaga, a slow learning experience for all of us. Although I did publicly come out last year at 36. Doon lang ako talaga publicly nag-post sa Facebook na I'm a cisgender gay man, parang ganon. Pero when it comes to my family, what I had a pretty long relationship. May grade kasi siya, so you have to break up. But we're good naman. And ang nangyari kasi is, unti-unti ko siyang pinakalala sa family ko. Tapos, syempre, ang pakilala ko lang is roommate ko. Parang gano'n. Tapos after a while, they realize parang, baka naman hindi lang roommate. Parang gano'n. So, after that, pre-process na lang namin. Parang gano'n. So, there are different ways of coming out. It's not really just how we see it on screen or what we read on newspapers or magazines or features. Kasi personal experience talaga siya. Sabi nga niya, don't force it. Because for some people, it's dangerous. So if you think that it is dangerous, don't force it. Find allies. Kasi yung pinaka-importante, find allies that can support you. Because kahit sa kanila lang, very few people na magka-come out ka, that's good enough. Magkakaroon ka ng alalay, kumbaga. Yung allies mo magiging support system mo.
Thank you, Sir Leia. Thank you, Ms. Ava. Okay, next question. I experienced one time from a senior citizen talking to her amiga in front of me that LGBTQ plus people are going to hell, and it really hurts a lot. And based on their outfit, they just came out of the church. I am a religious person too. How am I going to approach these kinds of people without being disrespectful?
I'll start. I'm a religious person too. I mean, I'm a Catholic, so I know how it is being a Catholic and growing up gay, and I know I've heard of that. Actually, yung term pa nga, masusunog sa impyerno, diba? It will be difficult to really talk to them, but if you can, do it as respectfully as you can, diba? Na especially for the older generations. I don't want to say boomers, pero the older ones, the older generations kasi siguro sort of may pagka sarado siguro yung perspective. Pero I've also encountered a lot of people who are older na by respectfully talking to them, it's not that they totally nagbago na yung pananaw nila, but they start listening. Kasi yun naman yung key eh. Start with that. Talk to them as respectfully as you can. Although kapag sinusungitan ka na, huwag ka nang makipag-away. Kasi iba naman na yun. Iba na yun. So, pero if they are willing to listen, talk to them. And siguro, hindi naman lang yung maririnig mo kasi baka lumabas para kang chismosa. Start with your family or your friends. If you hear those things coming from them, especially since with friends and families, you already have a relationship or a trust relationship. In other words, posibleng makinig sila sa inyo. Mas madali yun kausapin kesa a total stranger na kakausapin. Pero always think that since you consider if you're not an LGBT, but you consider yourself an ally, it's better that you talk and discuss kumbaga those misogynistic concerns or anti-LGBT sentiments. Yeah. That's all.
So for me, ire-echo ko din yung sinabi ni Leo na yes, engage sa dialogue as much as respectfully as possible kasi mga matatanda naman sila. And Filipinos naman are very respectful. And sabi ko nga, Filipinos are kind and understanding by nature. So minsan kasi nagkakaroon ng misunderstanding dahil lang sa tono ng boses natin. So, try to educate them. I know it will be difficult and a bit impractical, di ba? Na parang, i-educate ko kayo so GSC 101, ganyan. And magkakaroon syempre ng repulsion kasi gano'n naman, di ba? Kapag, if we introduce change, the natural reaction of people will be to refuse or refuse the change because they are already used to the status quo. So another way, apart from educating, is to find an ally, senior citizen ally na baka open, and then try to educate them with the concepts dun sa ally na senior citizen. And maybe yung ally natin na senior citizen, siya yung pwedeng makapag-reinforce nung idea ng SOGSC. Because at least nale-level mo yung playing field because your level of understanding is different from the level of understanding of senior citizen people. So how do you bridge the gap? So try to create some allies. So those allies will be able to be the bridge between those gaps. So yun, para sa akin, educate and then develop some allies sa senior citizen. At least makakatulong sila in spreading this information and understanding of LGBT people na hindi naman kami lahat mapupunta sa impyerno. Meron ding sumasayaw sa rainbow. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sir Leo and Ms. Ava. Okay, last 2 questions na po tayo because of the time. For Attorney Leo, what are your recommendations or pointers or programs for HR or IR practitioners, including business owners, so that they will better understand LGBTQ+ as part of the diverse workplace and eventually collaborate with them?
Siguro I'll talk based on my experience as not only as a legal professional but also as an HR professional. Kasi I work in a shared services company, which is also a multinational engineering company. In our company kasi, we make sure that we have SOGI awareness. So you start with that. Kasi that's a basic basic understanding para makita talaga na before you start adding policies that are inclusive to the LGBTQ community, you need the stakeholders, the leaders of the company to understand first what SOGI is para maintindihan din nila kung bakit merong, in a sense, clamor for equality. And so, and generally, when it comes to these businesses, ang tinitingnan nila is cost. So, pag diniscuss kanina, na-mention ko with what I read, na-mention ko na there's actually cost or expense or unrealized gain when you are not being inclusive. However, numerous studies already have been published and yung peer-reviewed pa siya na nagsasabi nga na when you have a more inclusive culture, mas mataas yung productivity ng mga employees who are LGBTQ, mas mataas yung hindi lang yung productivity pero may specific na effect yun sa economy, if not directly sa companies themselves, pero meron ding direct na effect yun. So, pag tinanong nila yung cost, ang kailangan yung sabihin is, you start with a SOGI awareness session because once you put policies in place to make the workplace more inclusive, may mga additional gains yun na maka-quantify talaga. Mas mas may losses kumbaga yung company pagdating sa lesser productivity, lesser skills for the LGBTQ community. Kasi sayang, alam nyo naman na kung gaano ka, alam mo yun na the LGBTQ community always have this parang chip on their shoulder, diba? We are always there to prove our worth. So, masisipag talaga yung mga LGBT. So, sayang din yung productivity kung mawawala siya because magiging anong tawag doon, less inclusive yung company. And kung less inclusive yung company, mawawala rin yung pinuhunan ninyo sa LGBTQs na sabihin na natin na closeted. Kasi pinagpupundaran mo yan ng you spend time and money to train them, but because of a less inclusive workplace, they will look for other companies that have a more inclusive culture. Yun. So, start with that siguro. And isa pa, reach out to, if you're a local company, that really wants to start being more inclusive to the LGBTQ community, you can reach out to the Philippine Financial Inter-Industry Pride kasi isa yan sa mga pioneering na organizations na tumutulong sa mga companies. And of course, we have so many other organizations that help out companies. Pero yung PFIP kasi, marami na siyang organizations na mga companies talaga. Nag-promote pa talaga ako. But yun.
Okay, so last question ako. What can you say about internal homophobia and how do you deal with it? Do you have your own biases within the LGBTQ plus community?
Ako ba yan? Ang hirap naman ng tanong. Una siguro i-acknowledge natin yung sa sarili natin na may internal homophobia tayo. Or kung anumang phobia, transphobia meron tayo. Kasi importante yon na ina-acknowledge natin. Kasi it is the only way we can find solutions para ma-break down yung internal phobias natin. And then, of course, yes, educate yourself para naman educate yourself, and then after that, self-reflect, self-evaluate whether your internal homophobia will do more harm or good to you. And also, I think, try to befriend, tulad nga sinabi ni Leo, na try to befriend some LGBT people. Baka makatulong yon para ma-break down yung mga internal homophobia and transphobia na meron ka. At least nakikita mo kung paano, ano yung mga happiness, ano yung mga loneliness and issues na kinakaharap ng mga LGBT people. And that way, you can self-reflect again, evaluate kung worth keeping pa ba yung internalized homophobia and transphobia mo. So that's what I can say to that.
Siguro just to add in before we will end this forum. Sa akin kasi, understanding that there is horizontal hostility within the community is important. Kasi meron talagang gays, merong lesbians na hindi, kumbaga, trans-exclusive. So merong ganon. So hindi lang internal homophobia. Kasi internal homophobia, kagaya ko, for example, when I was growing up, it felt like every time na tutoksoin ako na bakla, parang nakakatakot siya, di ba? Parang you feel the shame, but it's a process again of understanding why you feel that. But at the same time, after coming out then, after acknowledging the fact that I'm a cisgender gay man nga, I realized that there's still something out there. Know that when we say the LGBTQIA community, that means we have to understand the entire spectrum. And that also means that I can acknowledge that I can be wrong, that I should listen to other people who know better. Siguro kaya ako naging trans ally precisely because I have a very close friend who is a transgender woman. And napapagalitan niya ako every now and then. Kasi, especially before, kasi may mga may mga trans misogyny within the community. And it's a learning experience. Just be open to the fact na you may be wrong. And acknowledge that at some point na okay, tama naman. Especially ngayon, ang rallying cry talaga, di ba? Transgender rights within the LGBTQ community kasi halos na pag-iwanan yung transgender rights for the past many years. So even allies within the LGBTQ community, trans allies within the LGBTQ community, talagang we are really saying na trans rights are human rights, trans women are women, trans men are men. Because we also have to amplify their voices. So once you learn, once you acknowledge na, okay, mali yung perspective ko, tama yung perspective ng na tama talaga yung sinasabi ng transgender women at trans women are women, amplify their voices. Kasi yun yung pinaka-importante. They can, so that yung kailangan nila ma-amplify din natin. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ava and Sir Leo, for that very insightful discussion. If you have any more questions or clarifications for our speakers, you may send an email or message us. And that is all the time we have for today. Everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon to celebrate Beauty Pride Month 2020 through this webinar, Reading is Fundamental. The Human Library is now open from the safety of your own homes. Let us continue empowering each other in these trying times. For our registered participants, certificates of participation will be issued after you accomplish the evaluation form that will be sent to your email. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Attorney Rey Almero and Ms. Ava Villanueva for joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much po. To our head librarian, Ms. Sharon Maria Esposa Betan, for initiating this event and supporting the cause of the LGBTQ community. It has always been the mandate of EnggLib to be an inclusive and neutral ground that embraces all colors and genders. And we hope that we were able to inform more people through this webinar. And to the EnggLib Pride Month Committee, Sir Mark, Sir F, and Ma'am Noe, thank you for all your efforts in making this webinar possible. Thank you so much po sa lahat, and happy Pride. Muli, tuloy ang laban.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for inviting us.
Thank you.
We enjoyed discussing these matters with you all.
Yes.